Hi, we are the Good Ship Illustration and we run online courses to help illustrators and image makers navigate a creative career. We are Tanya,
Katie and Helen. We have about 70 years experience between us, each of us working in a different area of illustration.
This series is a special picture book series of podcast question and answer sessions. Right now the doors to the picture book course are open, so you can just Google the Good Ship picture book course and we should show up. But we'll pop a link in the description as well.
We've got a special Q&A on Wednesday on Instagram Live, haven't we?
Yes.
7 o'clock Wednesday. Turn up, ask all your questions there about the course or picture books, whatever.
Yeah. And if you want to make sure you get all the email reminders and stuff, just make sure you're getting our emails, which you can do on our website, thegoodshipillustration.com. We'll see you there. Welcome to this episode of our picture book special mini-series of podcasts. Today, there's a few things worth mentioning before we get stuck into the questions. So the first one is that it's Art Club tonight. It'd be lovely to see you there. Everybody's welcome.
That's 7 o'clock UK time, free on Insta for everybody.
Yes, and then after Art Club, the doors will be closing to the picture book course. So if you do feel like joining in, now is the best time to hop in.
But don't email us afterwards asking when the doors are closed, because we always say this, don't we? We're very lazy. It's not really laziness, is it? The software is just really hard to sneak anybody in after the doors have closed. So if you want to get in before doors close.
Yeah. And if you miss it, there will be another live round, but we don't know when yet. We're not that organised, but it will be next year. Okay, so with that all out of the way, let's do the first question. So this one is all about finding stories to illustrate. So this person isn't drawing their own, no, they're not writing their own stories, but they want to illustrate stories. So where can they find things?
Oh, that's a really good question. There are a couple of things I want to say here is, if you definitely don't want to write and you know you're just an illustrator, then you need to make a folio full of lovely images. And it's really handy to have something to hang those images on. So you could, take a story. Fairy tales are a good start. Have you got any suggestions, Tanya? You could find poem. You could just write a little journey. So you don't need to be a good writer. Just think, okay, I've drawn this character. I really like her. She's going to go on a journey today. And then you can fill your whole page with picture of your character. Maybe they meet somebody, they go somewhere together. None of this is written. It's all drawn. And in that little made up story, you're going to have interactions between characters and funny things happening. So yeah, you don't need to be a writer, but as long as you can kind of imagine a story for your folio, that would work really well.
But you could also do non-fiction work, couldn't you?
Yeah.
That doesn't need a story. So you don't have to be a writer. If you don't feel like an author illustrator type character, you could just focus on your favourite things. Maybe they're whales, or whales as in the animal, or the place too. Both are equally valid, aren't they? Or you could
mushrooms, Tanya.
Yeah, mushrooms. Or you could do the really simple, your version of an ABC, or your version of a numbers book, or of a kind of dictionary. If you look at the kind of very typical non-fiction books out there, just take one of those ideas and illustrate to that. It may not be character-led, but you can still have character-led non-fiction books as well. A character is guiding you through different aspects of learning about a subject.
You might not think of yourself as a writer, but you might actually, that might be a secret talent you don't know about yet. Because when I first started in picture books, I went to art school. I only thought of myself as an illustrator. I just didn't even consider writing a book. And then I went to see a few publishers and they all said, yeah, we really like your illustration work. When we find you a story, we'll give you a ring. But, I'm really impatient. And a few weeks went by and they hadn't found me a story. And so I just thought, I'll have a go at writing one myself. It can't be that hard. That was a silly, it is quite difficult. But I wrote my first one at the dining room table in one night, took it back and they published it. And then from then on, I was learning on the job. I've just learned as I've gone.
It's the best way to learn. Chuck yourself in at the deep end.
Yeah.
See what happens.
I'm not saying that's the best book I ever wrote. I'm kind of glad it's out of print. But it was a foot in the door and I learned on the job. And if you do our picture book course, we have loads of tasks in the picture book course that will get you started on your own story if you want to do that. We've actually got a freebie on the website as well, haven't we? We've got the character workshop.
Yes. And that'll be, if you go in the freebies bit of our website, it's the big button on the top right hand of the goodshipillustration.com. Freebies, and you'll see it on there.
But there's also your childhood illustrated workshop, which is another great way to trigger stories, just by kind of digging into your childhood.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Just scribbling memories from your childhood often brings back all of those emotions and feelings of what it was like to be a child. That's a really good starting point as well.
But then looking at the same subject of I'm an illustrator, but I don't want to write the story, you can equally say a lot of people think you've got to arrive as a team to a publisher with a great story. So quite often these relationships are writer-led, in that a writer will say, I've got a great story, will you illustrate it for me? And we'll go to the publishers. But it doesn't work like that.
No, I would stay clear of that. I'm sure there are exceptions to the rule, but the publishers really like to put and they're very experienced at putting a writer and an illustrator together. And I think if you arrive as a team, you've got to be ready that the publisher might drop one of you, or they might be so worried about spoiling your relationship that they just reject the whole book. So I would be really wary of that. There's that thing sometimes, we've all had it, where somebody's written a story and they're not published, and they say, will you illustrate it, and then we'll take it to the publisher. I would seriously avoid that at all costs. Avoid it. You're going to be illustrating for free. The chances are the publisher won't take it because they prefer to match a text with an illustrator, and they're so good at it. They want to be involved in that point. So yeah, I would avoid that.
And I think even if a writer is so keen, and they quite often they don't understand, for a new storybook writer, how the system works, and they'll pay you. But I don't see that really an individual can offer enough money to really pay an illustrator to do how many spreads?
Yeah, 14, 15, 16 spreads. The other thing is if they've written it and they have no experience of working with a publisher or an illustrator, they've probably got ideas in their head. And they're probably going to say to you, but I imagined it like this. And the enormous amount of changes and the terrible pain of working with somebody who has images in their head that they want you to create, it's just not worth it.
Yeah, and they're not visually led. So you're kind of sort of, it's not a good situation.
Even the weird pressure if they can pay you well and it's from their personal savings. Yeah. Like, oh no, it's your personal money. Oh, it's not a nice feeling.
And what if they say my favourite colour is purple?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are you then?
And quite often it's people write about things they love that are dear to them, so they have very clear ideas about what they should look like. So we had a student who, in order to supplement her, this isn't a good ship student, but at college, in order to supplement her final year's work, she took a commission from someone who wrote a story about their dog, but they started art directing her, and it was all wrong. And so from an educational point of view, the images that were coming out were compromised by the power dynamics of the relationship with the writer. And as a tutor, I couldn't then give her advice when she was already receiving instruction from the writer. It was an absolute nightmare, because then her work wasn't good enough at the end.
Sorry, Tanya.
No, don't worry.
I was just going to say the publisher are really good at keeping the author and the illustrator apart, which people are often surprised by that the first time you meet your author is when you're promoting the book, when it's out in the shops. And that's because the publisher, they really keep you both separate so that the author can't be doing that, can't be giving their own art direction and just muddying the waters with their opinion. They really make it clear to the author, we've chosen an illustrator, we think they're going to do this well. You have to let go a bit and leave it to them, because you can't work like that as an illustrator. You can't draw exactly what's in somebody else's head. It's got to come from your heart. Yeah. So the publisher are really good at negotiating that. They keep you well apart.
And your art directors. I mean, your art directors at Walker are just amazing, aren't they? They know what makes a good spread, what makes a good book. And so whether you're an illustrator working with an art director or you're a writer working with an editor, that's a dream situation. You've got someone at the top of their game helping you make what you've got even better. So if you're approaching picture books from the point of view of a writer or as an illustrator, just go it alone if you need to. But if you embody both skills, all to the better. But don't feel you have to have written the story. It's okay if you just want to be an illustrator.
It's amazing, though, how a lot of people, like the way that I write, I wouldn't say that I'm a writer. I would find it hard to go away and write a story without ever having made anything visual first. A story almost always starts with something visual. And then as I write, I draw at the same time. And the story evolves from drawing and seeing where the character leads me and then writing a bit and then coming back to the drawing. I think being a writer illustrator is a very different thing to being just a writer. So you might not think of yourself as a writer, but you might be a good visual storyteller. So we explore that a lot in the picture book course. We find ways of helping you make your own story.
There's so many people that have come out of picture book course who went in as illustrators and didn't imagine they would have the book content. By the end, most of them have got it, haven't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Helen's got lots of good tools for eking a story out of you, whether you think you can do it or not. So there was another question. I haven't got the exact words here, but the general gist was like, what do you reckon of this? The thing you've said it's been happening for years, but this move to shorter, less words in picture books.
Yeah, that is a thing. So I think when you buy vintage picture books from the 60s and 70s or before, picture books were much wordier. They were long pieces of text, like 500 words, 700 words. We've got a brilliant book by John Birmingham called Borker. I think it came out in the 70s. I think it's about geese. It's so good. It's absolutely brilliant. The text is really long in a way that you very rarely see in a picture book, or at least in a British picture book anyway. The trend seems to have been, ever since I've been doing it in the 90s, has been shorter text. Every now and again, something breaks the rule. I think the Gruffalo is probably a bit of a longer picture book format. So I think, try and keep it. You're really taking into account how likely it is you'll get published. So if you keep it short, sort of 200 words, it's an easier thing for the publisher to publish.
Yeah,
there's always exceptions, aren't there, where they'll do something longer, but
you'd be more likely to get away with breaking the rules if you've already made a name for yourself.
Yeah.
What does 200 words look like, for example, on a double-page spread? If you've got a small sentence on each page?
Yeah, a sentence or two on each page, or like you might have 3 vignettes with a short sentence on each vignette and then 2 sentences on the other side of the double-page spread.
Yeah.
Whereas, you look at some books from the 70s and almost of a double-page spread, a half spread could be text and the other half could be pictures. It is a shame because there are some really lovely books with longer text. I really like lots of the 1970s John Birmingham books with longer text. It just doesn't seem to be the fashion at the moment.
Yeah, but I suppose that's good to know if you're completely new to picture books, and you're writing stories, keep them short.
Like, if you've written it longer and the publisher absolutely love it, they'll help you knock it into shape, they'll help you edit it. But there's a rule of thumb, 200 words is about right.
Yeah. So there was a question here as well about struggling to visualize. So this person's written a story, but they're illustrating it, but they're really struggling to visualize what the children in their stories look like. And don't worry, you're in luck, because we did a workshop about this just the other day.
She says, I can draw everything except the characters. Any advice on character design? Yeah, brilliant. We've got a freebie on the website that we just mentioned before. Go on the website, have a look at that. We'll get you started.
Yes.
And in the course, there's loads of character stuff in the course.
That's so unusual, isn't it, for someone to say, I can draw everything else except characters. Most people are character driven. And the big question is, how do we do backgrounds? Yeah. So that's quite an unusual one.
But the character workshop's great. It's like a quick fire series of prompts, isn't it? And we've done it on Instagram a few times, but this time we were like, okay, it's going to go on Zoom so that it can live forever on the website.
It's amazing what you can do against a clock. So at Art Club, we always draw it against a clock. And then we've done these character making workshops against the clock as well. And when you have no time to worry about it when you're against a clock. So when you put all of those worries and, what if the character doesn't work if I do this? You put all that aside and you've just got a timer on. You've got to get it down on paper. It's amazing what you can create in those little short spaces of time.
It's magic.
Yeah.
Next one. This one, it's not about picture books. So it's naughty. You're going to sneak this one in. It's about live illustration.
Oh, shall I read this one out?
Yeah.
So... this is for you, Katie. It says, what are your top tips for live illustration? Would love to know more about how Katie does what she does. Maybe you should explain what you do.
Yes. So I do live event illustration. So basically that just means I draw pictures at events and meetings while people are talking. So people are talking about things and I'm drawing pictures live. And I've done that for lots of companies like Google, Apple, Netflix. But the reason I became a live illustrator is actually because of my inability to do deadlines. So it's just created a whole business around my inability to do normal illustrator things. But yeah, so the adrenaline and fear of a live event makes me get stuff done. And I found out it's something I really enjoy doing. So here's my top tips. And the first tip is to draw very fast. It sounds really obvious, but you've got to be super quick. You can't draw everything that everyone's talking about. And I always think that's a mistake people make when they're starting out, is they feel like they've got to be like an AI transcript machine and draw absolutely everything. But firstly, you can't do that because you're a human, not a machine. Secondly, when you draw too much content, it starts to look naff because it's too full and it's just all words. Nobody's looking at an illustration because they want to read loads. So just like the more pictures, the better. So yeah, don't draw everything. And have fun. I think because it's scary, you can easily get really like tense and like, oh my god, and have a terrible time. So and annoyingly, the only way to learn is to throw yourself into it and to force yourself to do it.
Like everything, learn on the job.
Exactly. And drawing TED Talks in your bedroom is a great way to start, but it's not the same. Firstly, TED Talks are so heavily scripted that everything they say is perfect content and you can't draw it all and it's really stressful. But when human beings are talking in a less practiced way, like human conversation that meanders around. So like probably podcasts are much easier to draw actually, because it's more of a human way of talking.
More organic.
Yeah, it's more organic. So you could like go to actual events and draw people talking, but you can't do it for free forever as well. If you want to do it as a paid thing, you got to start charging people. But yeah.
Do clients ever come back and ask you for changes after the live event?
Yes, but I've got good boundaries now. So like you were talking about in the doing picture book tour things for schools, in the same way, like for live illustration, I've got clear boundaries. So I say like, this is what I consider an easy change, and it'll take me like 2 working days to do it. I don't work Fridays. This is a big change. It'll take up to 10 working days. I don't work Fridays. P.S. I don't work Fridays. And then, and like this sort of change will be charged extra. You don't have to have changes if you don't want changes. So it's, yeah, sometimes, but it's usually things like I might have done a little spelling mistake or I've missed off something that I didn't think.
That's what I would do. It'd be full of spelling mistakes. It'd be atrocious.
Me too.
It's only ever the names, like people's names I get wrong, even if they're written on the screen. Sometimes they're just like, obviously very rarely and very reliable.
And so you were telling us once that you have like a catalogue of symbols that are very useful when you're doing these.
Yeah, so like the same sort of things come up again and again and again. So you get like almost a bank of icons in your head, which feels like the opposite of observational drawing, because you're like, a globe, a hand holding a heart. Some of them are quite cheesy and gross, but then they do get the words across really quickly without having to write words. So yeah, but developing your own bank of icons like that can be really helpful.
You should have a look on Katie's Instagram for some examples of it, because it's brilliant.
We should have a kind of Katie Pictionary Christmas party.
I feel like I've got an unfair advantage of Pictionary.
We'll get you really drunk first so that you can't think straight. The other thing I think about your job area, you must be a complete genius. You know everything about the world because you've been on private conferences where they're talking about the future.
Just random knowledge about silly things, and like leadership conferences and like environmental issues and acronyms for things I don't need to know acronyms for. It's great.
Do you look at the news and think, oh God, guys, you're so far behind. They're not doing that. They've got a whole other plan now, I heard.
It's nice. You do see like a general thermometer of the world, like COVID obviously was a huge topic for ages. Yeah. And then the great resignation, that everyone was quitting their jobs. That was a big one for a while. Talent retention. Yeah. It's also a thing now. Everyone's quitting their jobs.
You must have a very organised brain to be able to pick out which bits of the talk are important and organise them on the paper in a nice way.
It's funny. I feel like my brain, maybe it's because my brain is so disorganised. Like one thing pops out in my mind, I'm like, ooh, better write that down. That's something good. Like it's just like pure chaos. Then if something pokes its head above, I'm like, take that.
That's amazing.
I'd love to.
You should do a course. I was going to say that. Yeah, you should do a course about this.
One day, I would love to do a course on it in the good ship. Like after business courses birthed and everything, I think it'd be really fun to share.
That'd be so good.
Yeah, watch this space for next year. Everyone's been asking for it though, so next year would be. We're not pushing you or anything.
I feel like it's time that we're ready.
Yeah, I think so. Can I ask one of the really straightforward questions that people always ask over and over again about picture books? If there's a potential picture book idea, is it enough to approach publishers with the cover, the main character design, 2 to 3 spreads, and a synopsis of the story, like a bit more than an elevator pitch? Or are they expecting a full-blown mock-up of the book?
The first option. Yeah. Do not do the second one. The first one is enough. A kind of summary of the story, or if you've written it, the whole story. couple of spreads so they get an idea of what it'll look like. But don't think those are going to be the final versions. They're not the final versions of those spreads, because as soon as you get a contract with a publisher, they're going to wade in there with their own advice. And their advice is good because they've made so many books. So, send them some samples of your work, generally 1 or 2 spreads from the book, a summary of the story, a synopsis of the story, maybe some little sketches that you've done, development sketches for a character. And yeah, they'll sign, you can get a contract off the back of that. I think if you went in with a completely finished book, they would worry that you were too precious and you didn't want to change anything. And it might actually put them off. And imagine all the work you've done for no reason.
So you think you don't even need the cover? You could do the synopsis, couple of double-page spreads, character development sketches.
Sometimes I do thumbnails, and I might do a little thumbnail of a possible cover, but that hardly ever makes it to the final cover. So I'd just do a thumbnail. Thumbnails of all of the pages very, very roughly, and a synopsis of the story, or sometimes I've got the story and I type it out. One time I was commissioned on the strength of lots of drawings of a dog that I'd met at a dog rehousing shelter. Yeah, a dog farm. A Battersea Dogs Home. I had done lots of sketches of the dog. One in particular I really liked, and I'd written the word Fleabag above it. And I knew it was going to be a dog without a home. That's all I knew. And my agent sent it to my would-be publisher and just said, "Who will give this dog a home?" And the publisher replied, "We will." And then that became the book. So you definitely don't need a fully illustrated finished book.
That might be the record for the smallest amount of input into the book before bagging the deal.
I don't think often. I think once you've gotten your foot in the door and people know that you are capable of making a book, they'll give you a contract on an idea like that. And then sometimes you might say, "I know we said we were going to do this idea, but now I've got another one." And they're flexible about it. They'll say, right, you've gone off unicorns now. Okay, we'll do one about whatever your obsession is. Yeah.
It's showing that you're flexible, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then they can be flexible.
You're flexible, creative, you've got lots of ideas, you like working in a team, you're happy to take their ideas on board. I would also not send a publisher just one. If you're going to send them a book idea, you need to make sure they know you've got lots of ideas, maybe some bits from sketchbooks, little characters, and say, "Can I come and see you and show you all the interesting things happening in my sketchbooks?" They want to see you as a whole person. They want to know that you haven't got this one idea and that you're precious about that one. Yeah. They want to know that generally you're a creative person who can generate more ideas.
And if you're thinking, well, how do I even get to see these people in real life? Even doing that's a big ask. But as visual people, we could make up the equivalent kind of digital PDF portfolio and send that to them and go, right, here's my main idea, but I've got 2 or 3, look on these other pages, here's some scribbles, and here's one made into a full-blown character. So you can literally virtually ape the meeting you would have with a publisher that you can't get to see because you're an early career illustrator, by putting together a kind of really compelling PDF like deck portfolio that you can send to them, or that your literary agent can send to them.
Or put loads of those little bits of your idea on Instagram. So, your character's face, and then your character meets their friend, and, you could sort of tell the story visually in very rough form on Instagram. And if you're part of a nice big community of other illustrators who know publishers, who know editors, and you're in that, follow the nice hashtags where all of those people are hanging out, like Walk to Sea or Good Ship Hello, or you can make connections that way. And publishers are actively looking for people on Instagram. So, don't write your whole story out and share that, but you can share tiny elements that show how lovely your work is. I know people who've been commissioned for a picture book off the back of a lovely image on Instagram.
Oh, that's heartening. Isn't there a hashtag for children's picture book pitch? There's some pitch hashtags, aren't there?
Is it picture book postcard or something?
I'm not sure about that one.
I'm sure I've seen one floating around where it's like you just put a little postcard of like the sort of work you do and your details, I think. I'll Google it. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, actually, that would be so much easier than sending to people. Just do the equivalent of your "Who will give this dog a home?" Fleabag, but do it over a few days on Instagram with the right hashtags. Wow, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Do we want to do any more questions, or are we nearly
I think
done?
that's all of our questions for that
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Excellent.
one. Well, if you do decide to join the course, we'll see you in there. Because the doors close tonight.
Yeah. Friday night, art club tonight, doors close after art club.
Yes. And if you've got any more questions that you'd like us to answer on the next series of podcasts, email them to us. We're goodshipillo@gmail.com. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. We always find it hard to say goodbye, don't we? We always go,
We're all just looking at each other.
Should we just loiter a bit here until
Yeah.
the people who are listening drift off, and then we can go? Yeah. Okay. All right. Bye for now.
Bye.